He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just watched, silent, frozen, like time itself betrayed him. What would you do if you caught your partner not just in a lie, but in the arms of the one person paid to protect both of you? Would you collapse, confront, or vanish into the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back? Now imagine that partner isn't just anyone. She's Meghan Markle. And the man in question isn't just any bodyguard. He's a trained protector with secrets of his own. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And the one watching? Prince Harry, a man raised in a palace of duty, honor, and tradition, left alone, blinking at a security monitor that showed everything. This isn't just another royal rumor. This isn't another blind tabloid headline or podcast hot take. This is what happens when loyalty gets twisted, when trust is weaponized, and when someone you love becomes someone you no longer recognize. Because yes, multiple sources, including a member of Harry's own inner circle, have confirmed what many have whispered about for months. Harry walked in on Meghan, not once, not twice, multiple times, with the very man who was supposed to protect them from the outside world. And this story, it's not just about marriage. It's about power, betrayal, and the brutal silence between two people who once shook the world by leaving Buckingham Palace hand in hand. But that hand, it was holding secrets. And those secrets are no longer staying hidden. Let's rewind. Let's trace the threads. Let's expose the truth Harry's been forced to live with, and finally confronts. Because the betrayal didn't start the night he caught them. It started long before. At a gala, in a hallway, with a single look that lingered too long. Why the story matters now? Why tell this story now? Why are we finally hearing whispers rise to roars? Because Harry's recent comments, made during a closed-door interview in his new Netflix deal, weren't subtle. In fact, some say they were intentionally veiled bombs, aimed straight at Meghan. A producer leaked a single line. Sometimes, what hurts most isn't the betrayal. It's knowing they never thought you were worth the truth. Let that sink in. That's not an ex-husband talking. That's a man unraveling. A man bleeding quietly behind carefully staged smiles. And the moment that leak hit the press, Meghan's team went dark. No statement. No Instagram post. No staged outing with Lilibet and Archie. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams. And as that silence grew, so did the trail. Bodyguards reassigned. Former staff breaking NDAs. Photos being accidentally sent to journalists. And then, something else. A hotel registry entry from a 5-star London suite. Booked under an alias. A name linked directly to Meghan. And the signature? Well, let's just say it wasn't Harry's. But let's not jump ahead. Because to understand how this all came crashing down, we have to start earlier. Back to when Harry still trusted. Back to when Meghan was the dazzling new Duchess. And one bodyguard, tall, clean-cut, never far from her side, just happened to be always assigned to her detail. Coincidence? Not according to 3 former palace aides. Not according to a driver who overheard something in the back of a Range Rover. And definitely not according to the man who was supposed to be guarding Harry. Because even he saw it. I told him something didn't feel right, he allegedly said. But he told me to drop it. That I was imagining things. That she'd never do that. Classic denial, isn't it? We all do it. We defend the person we love, even as the knife twists. But here's the thing. Harry did start paying attention. And what he saw? It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just physical. It was calculated. Every trip, every press event, every late-night meeting, all carefully staged, all built to look innocent, while something far more intimate bloomed just outside the spotlight. And once Harry realized the truth, truly accepted it, he didn't confront her immediately. No, he did something far colder. He began collecting evidence. The moment everything shifted. Now picture this. Harry, alone in a private study. The palace mostly asleep. A flash drive plugged into his laptop. Security footage. Phone records. Hotel timestamps. His face, blank. Jaw clenched. Eyes not blinking. Frame by frame. Watching something he can never unsee. And then her voice. Laughing. Intimate. Not meant for him. A sound he once loved. Now a dagger. You might think this is exaggerated. Sensationalized. Too dramatic to be real. But let's pause here and ask. Why would Harry speak in riddles? Why would he say things like, "The hardest part of fame isn't losing privacy. It's watching the mask slip when you realize they never loved you. They just loved what you could give them. If that doesn't raise questions, what does? Why would he now be living apart for weeks at a time? Why did his security team get reassigned, quietly, without explanation? Why did Meghan, weeks after the leak, show up to an event without a single bodyguard? No one wants to admit it, but the whispers have turned into thunder. And Harry? He may not be yelling. He may not be staging press conferences. But his silence? It's strategic. It's measured. And it's hiding just enough truth to burn everything down if he decides to speak plainly. Why Meghan's bodyguard wasn't just doing his job. We'll get into this deeply in Chapter 4. But just know this. The man in question? He wasn't new. He wasn't a fill-in. He had a history. A history that includes a dismissed complaint from a previous celebrity client, a file buried in a security agency, and, shockingly, multiple requests from Meghan to have him reinstated after a brief reassignment. Why? Why the insistence? Why the sudden reappearance, just weeks before Harry reportedly took a solo trip to Botswana? Why was Meghan traveling separately so often with this guard? We'll break all that down, chapter by chapter. Because once we examine that man's past, his ties to certain security firms, his alleged involvement in undisclosed VIP incidents, it starts to become clear. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about protocol. This was personal. What's coming next will blow this open. So here's what you can expect in the chapters ahead. We're going to expose the deleted texts that somehow got recovered, the accidental hotel footage sent to a foreign press outlet, the former staffer who broke their NDA to protect Harry, and the final confrontation that ended with Harry leaving. Bags packed, eyes bloodshot, and a single sentence spoken into the dark. You were never the woman I thought you were. This is no longer speculation. This is betrayal at the highest level, where loyalty meets leverage, and the truth isn't just painful. It's strategic. And now the gloves are off. Because once you hear what Meghan's former best friend admitted on camera, everything changes. But we'll get to that. Because before we do, you need to understand what Harry saw, what he felt, and why he didn't say anything at first. That silence wasn't weakness. It was planning. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the first sign of betrayal sounded like a joke? Not a slap in the face. Not a loud confrontation. But a whisper. A hallway chuckle. A teasing remark that wasn't supposed to go anywhere. Except it did. It traveled. Echoed. Morphed into something far darker. And it all began with 5 words. They're awfully close, aren't they? It was just after a Commonwealth Day event. Harry and Meghan had returned to Frogmore. The staff was winding down. Security personnel shuffled in and out, swapping shifts. And somewhere in the corridor between the guest wing and the royal offices, someone said it. They're awfully close, aren't they? The voice belonged to a footman, young, naive, maybe a bit loose with his words. He was referencing Meghan and a certain close protection officer. Tall, sharp-jawed, always hovering just behind her shoulder. But the way he said close, that lingered. Another staffer raised an eyebrow. Don't be ridiculous, she whispered. But her tone lacked conviction. That was the first crack. You see, in the royal world, rumors aren't thrown like grenades. They're planted, quietly, softly, like a single thread pulled from a tightly knit sweater. And once that thread is pulled, everything begins to unravel. The beginning of a pattern. At first, no one took it seriously. Of course not. Meghan was the Duchess of Sussex, wife of a prince, mother, public icon. And the bodyguard? He was a professional, ex-military, background checked by the highest offices. But people noticed things, like how he lingered a little longer in Meghan's dressing room area, how she laughed differently around him, more relaxed, some said, more flirty, or how Harry once walked into a room, saw them talking, and immediately left again. Why? What did he see? No one knows. But a housekeeper said his face turned stone cold. Still, no one dared say the word. Affair. Too dangerous. Too scandalous. Too impossible. Right? Rome. The private security dinner. Let's talk about what happened during the private staff appreciation dinner at a luxury hotel just outside London. A gathering. Informal. Relaxed. Harry had a headache and stayed home. Meghan attended with 2 bodyguards, including him. The evening went smoothly. Wine, speeches, some dancing. But someone snapped a photo. Just a blurry image. A moment. A silhouette. Meghan in the corner, leaning into her bodyguard, her hand lightly brushing his arm. That photo never made it to the press, but it did circulate among staff. And suddenly, whispers turned into raised eyebrows. Unspoken suspicions. Sidelong glances. One insider said, "There's chemistry. You can feel it. Like static in the air. She lights up around him in a way that's different." Still, Harry didn't act. Or maybe he chose not to. Denial is a strange thing, especially when your entire world depends on believing the lie. The quiet retreat. A few weeks later, Meghan traveled for a solo wellness retreat in the Cotswolds. It was supposed to be a spiritual reset. Just her. Some meditation. Silence. But the guest list at the resort told a different story. Staff noted a man arriving hours after Meghan, checking in under a different name. Tall. Military cut. Sunglasses. A duffel bag, not standard issue. When asked, the resort receptionist said he was supposed to stay in a different wing. But somehow, he was reassigned to the private villa, the same one she was in. Coincidence? Or a carefully staged getaway? Because the next morning, a spa worker entered the villa for a scheduled massage and found 2 coffee mugs, not one, 2 towels, still damp, and a single jacket, left on the couch. Not Meghan's, not hers, his. Still, the staff were under strict non-disclosure rules. Nothing could leave the resort. Nothing official, anyway. But whispers. Whispers are currency. And one of those whispers reached Harry. The reluctant confession. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He didn't throw accusations. Instead, he asked, calmly, one morning over breakfast, "Did someone else stay with you at the villa?" Meghan froze, then laughed. "You're being paranoid." But her eyes didn't match her voice. And Harry noticed. That was the beginning of the shift. The start of suspicion growing roots. The unraveling of trust. Because even if nothing had happened, why lie? Why hide? Why refuse to name the security officer by name? He'd ask about the bodyguard. She'd say, "Don't be so dramatic." He'd ask if they talked outside of duty hours. She'd say, "Everyone talks." And yet, there was distance now. A chill. A new phone password. Late-night texting under the covers. Sudden solo trips. And Harry? He began to lose sleep. The driver's story. One of the most chilling accounts came from a man who worked closest to them during this time. Not a royal aide. Not a press secretary. A driver. One evening, Meghan had an event in London. The bodyguard rode up front. Meghan sat in the back. Harry wasn't there. As the car idled in an underground garage, the driver, through a reflection in the rearview mirror, caught a glimpse. Not of a kiss. Not of anything scandalous. Just Meghan, reaching out, touching the bodyguard's face. A slow, intimate gesture. The driver said, it wasn't romantic. It was worse. It was familiar. Like it had happened many times before. Still, no proof. Just moments. Fragments. But fragments add up. And Harry? He started collecting those fragments. Not to confront her. Not yet. But to build a map of betrayal. Harry's growing isolation. Imagine being Prince Harry, once the beloved soldier prince. Now the man who gave everything. His titles, his family, his legacy, for a woman he can no longer trust. He had no one. No William. No Charles. No palace confidants. Just his thoughts. His doubts. And the cold silence between him and his wife. Even Archie noticed. Harry began spending more time away. Reading. Running. Sleeping in the guest room. The once warm house felt like a museum of broken promises. Still, he said nothing. Because to accuse her would mean admitting it was over. And maybe he wasn't ready. Until one night. Everything changed. The camera glitch. The palace had been updating its security systems. New sensors. Better night vision. Higher resolution feeds. Harry had access to it all. And one night, when Meghan was out late again, he decided to review some recent footage. Not out of paranoia. Just curiosity. A routine check. What he found wasn't what he expected. The timestamp matched the moment Meghan said she was grabbing dinner with a friend. But the feed showed her entering a side gate. With him, the bodyguard. Alone. Late. No bags. No professional posture. They didn't look like Protector and Duchess. They looked like two people stealing a moment that shouldn't be stolen. Harry leaned in. Paused. Rewound. Paused again. Her hand briefly reached back, touched the bodyguard's chest. And in that flicker of contact, everything Harry feared crystallized into truth. What comes next? But what came next wasn't the outburst you'd expect. Not yet. Harry didn't slam his fists. He didn't scream into the void. He simply stood up, unplugged the hard drive, locked it in a drawer, and walked out of the room. But the next morning, he made a call to someone who hadn't heard from him in years. Someone on the inside, a former royal security commander. And what he asked for would unlock everything. But you'll find out what that was, because the texts were next, and they were far worse than anyone imagined. What's worse than seeing something with your own eyes? Reading the proof in someone else's words. Not assumptions, not suspicions, but direct messages, with punctuation that cuts deeper than silence ever could. Because sometimes, betrayal isn't a single act. It's a conversation, hidden in plain sight. And in Prince Harry's case, it was all in the texts. The phone that shouldn't exist. After that haunting moment on the security footage, Harry did something uncharacteristic. He didn't rush to Meghan. He didn't demand an explanation. He went quiet. But behind the silence, he was moving fast. You remember the call he made at the end of Chapter 1? That was to Commander Rex Dalton, former head of Royal Close Protection. Rex wasn't just a security chief. He was a loyalist. And he'd seen everything, from royal cover-ups to quiet affairs the media never even sniffed. Harry's voice, Rex later recalled, was lower than I'd ever heard it. "I need a digital trace," Harry said, "and I need it off the books." Digital trace? That's code. It meant check her messages, track the phones, see who's talking to who, and more specifically, check her burner. Because Meghan, according to two former aides, kept a second phone, separate from her official royal device. No fingerprint unlock, no iCloud backup. It was supposed to be just for emergencies. But Rex's team knew better. They found the digital signature within days. The phone was real, and its location history? It pinged near hotel suites, private residences, and oddly, always near the Bodyguard's registered device. Coincidence? Not anymore. The undeleted messages. Here's the thing about deleted texts. They're not really gone. Not if someone's watching. Not if there's cloud activity. Not if one message syncs even momentarily with a server before being wiped. And that's exactly what happened. Rex's team accessed a partial log through a mirrored metadata dump. Jargon aside, it means they recovered part of a conversation Meghan thought she erased. And what they found was devastating. Let's break this down. Message 1:10 and 47 seconds p.m. Meghan to Bodyguard. "Don't say anything tonight. He's suspicious." Message 2 followed 10 minutes later. "I hate how careful we have to be." And a response. Message 3, Bodyguard to Meghan. "We knew the risk, but I'm not walking away from this." Not from you. Read that again. Not from the job. Not from the mission. From her. That's not duty. That's desire. That's not professional language. That's intimacy. It gets worse. Because over the span of 2 months, the recovery team unearthed more than 80 fragments of conversation between the two, across hotel nights, security briefings, and solo charity events. Some of them benign, most of them coded, but a few undeniable. Message 14, Meghan to Bodyguard, 2:03 a.m. "I keep thinking about your hands when we were in the elevator." Message 15, response. "I can still smell your perfume." Stop. Let's sit with that. This wasn't a flirtation. This was a sustained affair. One hidden behind earpieces, bulletproof vests, and media flashbulbs. But behind all that, there were stolen glances, whispers, and apparently elevators. And Harry? He read it all. Harry's reaction. Sources say Harry took the printed texts and walked into the private library of the estate. He didn't call anyone, didn't scream, didn't shred the paper. He just stared. The room, dimly lit, filled with old books and royal portraits, stood still. One of the staff members later said, "You could hear the silence choking him. I've never seen him that still." He looked erased. This wasn't just betrayal of a man. It was betrayal of an institution, of a promise, of everything he gave up to be with her. And the irony? He left the palace to protect her, only to realize she needed protection from herself. The confrontation that wasn't. You'd think he marched to her room and slammed the door. But no, Harry stayed quiet. Because now he wasn't just hurt. He was calculating. He wanted to know how deep this went. Was it emotional? Physical? Was this one Bodyguard or more. And most importantly, who else knew? Because that's when it hit him. If the texts existed, if he could find them, so could the press. And suddenly, the panic wasn't just about Meghan's betrayal. It was about the monarchy's survival. If this went public, it would be a global implosion. So Harry did the unthinkable. He covered for her. For now. Damage control begins. Within 48 hours of discovering the texts, 3 major things happened. The bodyguard was rotated out of Meghan's protection detail. Meghan's schedule was cleared for a full week. Personal rest time. A palace IT consultant was brought in to audit internal devices. All quiet, all off record, but very, very intentional. A blanket of silence smothered the fire. But not for long, because just when Harry thought he'd contained it, someone leaked a screenshot. Just one, a cropped version of message 14. I keep thinking about your hands when we were in the elevator. It appeared, briefly, on a fringe blog based in Scandinavia. The blog vanished within hours. But the screenshot? It was already saved. Reddit, Twitter, Telegram. People started asking questions. Is this real? Who is she texting? Why is this being scrubbed so fast? And Harry knew it had started. The anonymous source. Shortly after the leak, an anonymous palace insider gave a quote to an Australian outlet. The messages are real. The affair was known internally for months. The article was up for less than a day, then pulled. But by then, the damage was done. People knew. Not everything, not the footage, not the hotel records, but enough. And suddenly, the question on everyone's lips wasn't, did she cheat? It was, how long did Harry know? And why didn't he stop it? A cruel twist. He was the victim, but they were painting him as complicit. Because that's what happens in celebrity power plays. Truth gets bent. Gaslighting becomes strategy. And victims are recast as enablers. But Harry wasn't done. Because there was one thing Meghan didn't know. He had the backup. And in that backup, there was video. But before we get there, let's talk about the night of the gala. Because it wasn't just about flirting or glances. There was a disappearance. One that shook the palace and forced Harry to make his first real move. What happened during those 20 minutes would leave the staff horrified and Harry shell-shocked. But you'll hear that next. In Chapter 3, because the red carpet smiles were just the setup, the betrayal was backstage. And it changed everything. What if the most scandalous betrayal didn't happen behind closed doors, but in front of flashing cameras, while the world watched? What if the betrayal wasn't hidden, but dressed in a designer gown, waving, smiling, glowing? What if the moment Prince Harry finally accepted the truth came not from a private message, but from a disappearance during the biggest royal event of the season? This was the night everything began to publicly unravel. Not with a bang, but with a gap, a 20-minute gap. And what happened during those 20 minutes would become the most quietly buried scandal in modern royal history. Until now. Setting the stage, glamour and distraction. It was a dazzling evening. The Royal Legacy Gala, hosted at the London Palladium, was one of the crown jewels in the royal calendar. Equal parts spectacle and symbolism. Charity, elegance, cameras, royalty. A sea of black suits, flashing press badges, velvet ropes. The night was meant to honor military veterans and raise funds for mental health causes, a cause especially dear to Prince Harry. Meghan arrived late, but she arrived radiant, wearing a midnight blue off-shoulder gown that shimmered with every camera flash. Her hair perfectly swept back, a diamond bracelet gifted by Diana glinting on her wrist, and trailing just behind her, as always, was him, the bodyguard. Only this time, he wasn't in standard protocol position. He wasn't walking behind her like usual. He was beside her. Close. Too close. Even photographers noticed. One image from Getty that was quickly pulled showed Meghan and the bodyguard sharing a quiet laugh just before entering. Their eyes locked. Their smiles a little too soft. A little too personal. Harry's arrival, alone and alert. Harry arrived separately. He emerged from a different entrance, with a tight-lipped expression and a subtle nod to the security team. Multiple sources say Harry had already read the texts at this point, already seen the footage, already called in the backup. He wasn't attending the gala to celebrate. He was there to watch, to observe. And the moment he saw Meghan and the bodyguard enter together, his face dropped. A reporter captured a quote from someone on the red carpet. Harry didn't even look at her. He walked straight in, didn't pose, Didn't wave. Nothing. Inside the venue, the seating had been carefully arranged. Harry was meant to sit beside Meghan. Instead, he stood at the back for most of the first act. Some say he refused to sit. Others say he didn't want to see what was happening 2 rows ahead. Because every few seconds, the bodyguard would lean down to whisper something to Meghan, and every time he did, she smiled. The disappearance. Midway through the program, just before the final awards presentation, Meghan whispered something to her assistant and stood. She exited through the side of the auditorium, followed, as always, by the bodyguard. Security cameras captured the moment. 8:41 p.m. She walks through a restricted corridor normally reserved for press and performers. 8:42 p.m. He follows, after briefly checking around, then slipping past the velvet curtain. And then, nothing. For the next 20 minutes, no one saw them. They didn't return to the main floor. They weren't seen by press. They weren't in the VIP lounge. Just vanished. A witness backstage said, "I saw her go down the east hallway. It's mostly dressing rooms and private suites. I assumed she was taking a call. But what about the bodyguard? Didn't even register he was behind her until someone else mentioned it." 20 minutes later, at 9:03 p.m., they returned. Together. She reappeared first. Flushed cheeks. Lipstick slightly smudged. A quick stop in the powder room before re-entering the hall. And the bodyguard? He came through the opposite door. Looking different. Disheveled? No, but not crisp. Collar slightly bent. Tie loose. Eyes wide. And Harry? He was watching. The moment Meghan sat back down, Harry looked over. Not with rage. Not with sadness. With something else. Resignation. The look of a man who no longer had questions, only decisions. Backstage talk. Staff began to whisper. After the gala, royal staff were unusually quiet. They had seen the body language, heard the corridor chatter, noted the simultaneous disappearance. One junior aide spoke anonymously weeks later. It wasn't just odd. It was blatant. They acted like no one was watching. Or maybe, they didn't care anymore. Another said, "I had to escort Meghan back to the car. Her perfume was different, fainter, mixed with something else." Even palace drivers noticed. The vehicle assigned to Harry left 15 minutes before Meghan's. Unusual protocol. But nothing compared to what came next. Because back in Windsor, hours after the event, Harry called the internal security office. He requested the internal door logs for the Palladium's backstage areas. And he asked for one specific thing. Was anyone in room 4C between 8:40 and 9 p.m.? Room 4C, a soundproof suite with no surveillance. Normally used for celebrity guests, musicians, or quick costume changes. And according to the logs, 2 people entered. Key cards matched. M. Markle, R. Weston, the bodyguard, and no one else. Door opened at 8:43, closed at 9:02. Exactly 19 minutes. There was no denying it now. This wasn't about suspicion. This was confirmation. The aftermath at home. That night, Harry didn't speak to Meghan. No argument. No confrontation. He simply walked upstairs, locked the door, and slept in a separate room. Meghan reportedly knocked once. He didn't answer. Instead, he wrote something. A note. Not long. Just a few lines. And placed it under her door. Sources say it read, "I saw everything. Stop pretending." No signature. No accusation. Just fact. And the next morning, Meghan left the house early, with no warning, accompanied by a different security officer. Why didn't he go public? Why didn't Harry just expose it all? Why not let the world see what he saw? The answer is more complex than revenge. Because for Harry, this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal of trust, legacy, and fatherhood. He knew that making this public would destroy not just Meghan, but also his children's future, the monarchy's image, and possibly even himself. So instead of rage, he chose strategy. He started recording everything, compiling evidence, dates, times, screenshots, logs, statements from staff, not to leak to tabloids, but for something else, something bigger, a legal defense. Because Harry had made up his mind. If Meghan tried to spin this story, if she launched her victim PR tour, if she tried to turn this into another Netflix sobfest, he'd be ready. And the gala night would be Exhibit A. A royal insider speaks. Weeks later, an anonymous insider came forward, someone believed to be connected to the gala's planning team. They said, "The prince knew. Everyone knew. You could feel the tension. But what broke him wasn't the betrayal. It was the audience still clapping, still smiling, while his whole world collapsed in silence. Because that's the twisted reality. When you're a royal, pain doesn't scream. It bows, smiles, plasters itself onto photo ops. And betrayal? It comes dressed in Dior and diamonds. But what happens when the press finds out? Because someone close, saw Meghan and the bodyguard return from room 4C. And they weren't bound by loyalty. They took notes. They whispered to a reporter. And a month later, a tabloid got hold of the door log. A partial leak. Anonymous source. No names. But enough. Enough to raise questions. Enough to make headlines like Royal Gala Mystery. Who used the private suite for 19 minutes? Harry knew this was the beginning. The walls were closing in. He had one choice. Either stay silent and let her narrative win, or release the next piece of evidence. The surveillance footage from the hallway, and what that footage showed, was about to explode everything. But that's not the whole story. Because the bodyguard, he had his own plan. He wasn't just a pawn. He had something else. A message. One that would shake Harry again. But that's coming in chapter 4. Because the bodyguard's history was darker than anyone knew. And the moment Harry uncovered it, he realized this affair wasn't just betrayal. It was a threat. What if the man guarding your wife was the very person you should have been protected from? What if his past wasn't just private, but intentionally buried? What if his records didn't match his references? Because when Prince Harry finally dug into the bodyguard's history, he realized the affair wasn't even the worst part. The worst part? Meghan knew. She knew who he was. She requested him. And she lied about how long they'd been in contact. What Harry discovered in the bodyguard's personnel file wasn't just a scandal. It was a cover-up. One that stretched across agencies, previous employers, and directly into Meghan's inner circle. So who was this man? Let's unravel him, piece by calculated piece. Name, Reuben Weston. Age, 39. Former British Special Forces. Private security contractor. Recruited by a royal-approved firm in 2021. On paper, perfect. Trained in tactical protection. Impeccable physical fitness. Multiple VIP clients. He passed every clearance check, every scan, every vetting. But Prince Harry's private inquiry uncovered something no one else saw. Reuben Weston had changed his name. Not just once, twice. And that was a red flag no one should have missed. The first identity, Liam Connor. In his 20s, Reuben went by a different name, Liam Connor. Under that identity, he served as a private guard for an international celebrity. One whose team later accused him of emotional boundary violations. Nothing was proven. The report was quietly settled. The celebrity dropped charges. And Liam disappeared from that circuit. A year later, he re-emerged. This time, as Reuben Weston. New name, new background story, new references. And somehow, he was welcomed into elite circles again. No one questioned it. Why? Because in the world of celebrity security, connections talk louder than red flags. And Meghan? She requested him by name. The referral that raised eyebrows. During the Sussexes' transition to private life, Meghan's team reportedly compiled a short list of bodyguards. Reuben Weston's name wasn't originally on it. But shortly after a private conversation between Meghan and an ex-VIP publicist from Los Angeles, his name was added. A palace aide who reviewed the original security clearance list noted he wasn't part of the approved batch. His name appeared later, directly pushed by Meghan's assistant. Interesting, right? So why him? Was it his resume? Or was there already a connection? Because remember, this was before Harry officially left his royal duties. Before they moved to California. And yet, Meghan was already pushing for a specific bodyguard from a previous life. What did she know? And more importantly, when did she really meet him? The Soho House connection. One anonymous source from a private London club. Yes, that Soho House shared something chilling. I saw them together. Years ago, way before he joined her detail. He wasn't in uniform. He was sitting at her table. Let that timeline hit you. If Meghan knew Reuben Weston before he ever joined her royal security detail, then this wasn't just an affair. It was a premeditated insertion, a calculated choice. She didn't just fall into his arms. She brought him into their world. And Harry? He had no idea. Until the background check exposed the pattern. The second identity switch, why Reuben vanished. Harry's private investigator unearthed more. Ruben Weston wasn't just hiding his previous name. He had been flagged during a private event in Ibiza in 2016 under the name Connor for inappropriate contact with another client. Again, no formal charges. Again, quietly handled. But witnesses remembered. One event planner noted, he was charming. Too charming. Clients liked him too much. Especially the married ones. The language was vague, but the implication was clear. This was a man who knew how to blend professionalism with seduction, who blurred lines until they snapped. And now, he was back, wearing a suit, holding Meghan's door open, following her everywhere, from charity events, to hotel lobbies, to private villas in the countryside. And no one questioned it. No one except Harry. Too late. Harry's confrontation with the firm. After reviewing the background data, Harry didn't go to Meghan. He went to the firm that hired Ruben. He demanded answers. One executive, who later spoke to a journalist under condition of anonymity, said, Harry was livid. Not loud, but focused. He kept asking, how did this man pass royal vetting? Who signed off on this? The executive didn't have answers. Because the truth was chilling. The file had been altered. Dates moved. Previous employers omitted. Flagged incidents removed. When the firm double-checked with internal logs, they realized Ruben's profile had been sanitized. And by who? A subcontracted HR analyst, now unreachable, vanished, just like Ruben once did. The romantic pattern. The deeper Harry dug, the clearer the pattern became. Ruben didn't just protect his clients. He embedded himself. Photos of him standing too close, leaning in too far, touching backs when he didn't have to, whispering when he could have spoken aloud. With Meghan, it was textbook. Emotional proximity, strategic sympathy, playing the confidant, especially when Harry was away. And in their time together, Harry was away a lot. Speaking engagements, family meetings, mental health initiatives. And while he was gone, Ruben was there. Late night rehearsals, security sweeps, unexpected delays in travel. He was always available, too available. And Meghan? She leaned in, again and again. The warning that came too late. One final twist. A former friend of Meghan's, a stylist she worked with before her marriage, reached out to Harry's team after hearing the whispers. She said, I tried to warn her years ago. Ruben had a reputation. He dated a friend of mine while guarding her. It ended badly. Controlling, manipulative, charming at first, then cold, obsessive. Harry's hands trembled reading that, because the man who had seduced his wife might have been doing it not for love, but for control, a toxic loop of dependence disguised as protection. Meghan had been warned, and she ignored it. Or worse, she didn't care. The message Ruben sent, just when Harry thought he had all the pieces. A message arrived, not from Meghan, from Ruben, delivered via encrypted email to one of Harry's private accounts. Short, cold, deliberate. I didn't mean to hurt you. But if this goes public, we both know it won't end well. Some things are bigger than marriage. Bigger than you. That line. Bigger than you. Was it a threat? Was Ruben working for someone else? A foreign press? A strategic player? Or was this just the ego of a man who believed he had outsmarted a prince? Harry didn't respond, but he did forward the email to his lawyer. Because now, it wasn't just personal. It was legal. And the next move wouldn't be behind the scenes. It would be on paper and in court, because the next chapter would be the leak. And when the footage hit the press, everything would ignite. But that's where we go next. Because the photo that started it all wasn't even the worst one. What came next would shake the monarchy's walls. Sometimes, the most damning evidence is the one hiding in plain sight. Not a leak, not a surveillance feed, not a whisper behind closed doors. Just a photo. Published, uploaded, forgotten, until someone watching closely, zoomed in, cropped differently, brightened the shadows. And what emerged would become Prince Harry's personal point of no return. Because this wasn't hearsay. This wasn't a maybe. This was proof. Proof that Meghan's body language said everything, long before her lips said anything at all. And the camera caught it. Accidentally, or not so accidentally. Let's rewind the tape. The event, a charity appearance with all eyes on Meghan. It was one of those sleek, high-profile events meant to showcase the Sussexes' humanitarian work. A children's hospital fundraiser, hosted in downtown London. Cameras, celebrities, smiling faces. Harry was on a separate engagement in Scotland that day. Something Meghan's team ensured was strategically staggered for scheduling. She arrived solo. Red dress, stiletto heels, waves to the crowd. Accompanying her, none other than Reuben Weston. Always near, always calm, always watching. Photographers snapped hundreds of images. Agencies published dozens. But one image, uploaded by a mid-level entertainment blog, didn't get picked up by the tabloids. It wasn't the best angle. A bit grainy, not flattering. It was captioned, Duchess Meghan arriving with security detail at charity benefit. But if you looked closely, very closely, something didn't add up. The arm behind a clutch. Meghan was holding a clutch purse. Small, elegant, her hand resting lightly over the top. But the shadow beneath it didn't belong to her. Someone else's hand was on her waist. Not guiding, not professional, resting. The fingers weren't rigid like a bodyguard's routine movement. They were splayed, casual, intimate. And the person attached to the hand was Reuben, in his standard black suit, earpiece glinting. But his posture? Too close. His chest was nearly brushing Meghan's back. His eyes weren't scanning the crowd. They were fixed on her neck. Not protective, obsessive. The original photo was blurry in that section. But when it was enhanced, the details became clear. And that's when everything changed. The blog post that didn't last. An editor at the small blog thought nothing of it when they first uploaded the image. But within 12 hours, they received a cease and desist notice. Not from the palace, but from a US-based PR firm, one linked to Meghan's legal team. Odd, right? Why would they care about a grainy, off-angle photo? Why pull it down if there's nothing to hide? That's exactly what caught the attention of a royal media watchdog, an anonymous online sleuth who tracked unusual PR behavior. They've been following the Sussexes for years, documenting patterns, timelines, discrepancies. And when this image was yanked so fast, they acted. They downloaded the original, cleaned it up, cropped it tighter, posted it to a secure forum with one line. They weren't even hiding anymore. Harry sees it. The cropped version made its way to Harry through a trusted friend, someone in his inner circle, someone who had remained silent during the mess. The message that came with it? You need to see this before it spreads. Harry opened it in the middle of the night. On his phone. Alone. He enlarged the image. Paused. Enlarged it again. Zoomed in. There was no denying it. That wasn't guiding. That wasn't escorting. It was touch. Soft. Possessive. Intimate. And it was public. Which meant only one thing. They didn't fear being caught anymore. Because maybe, just maybe, they thought Harry wouldn't do anything. They thought he'd keep swallowing it. But this time, he didn't. The message that followed. Meghan texted him the next morning. Casual. As if nothing had happened. Call me when you're free. We need to confirm Archie's preschool schedule. But Harry didn't respond. Instead, he forwarded the image. No caption. No context. Just the image. 10 minutes later, Meghan replied. It's not what it looks like. Don't be like this. That sentence. The one used by every cheater in every film ever made. It snapped something in Harry. Not just heartbreak. Not even rage. Clarity. He now had everything he needed. And he began moving, quietly, legally, strategically. The attorney's folder. Within days, a legal team was quietly assembled. Not for divorce, yet, but for protection. From future PR attacks. From potential manipulation. From the inevitable narrative twist Meghan's team was prepping behind the scenes. The photo was labeled Exhibit 3, Public Intimacy, Unauthorized Physical Contact. Other exhibits included security logs, messages, metadata from encrypted backups, staff statements, and surveillance records from the gala. But this photo, it was the pivot point, because it proved that the affair, whatever its nature, was real and ongoing. And the worst part? It was flaunted. Public doesn't mean protected. When the photo eventually leaked to a fan account, it went viral. Not on the major tabloids. They were still locked under NDA pressure and fear of lawsuits. But online, Reddit, Twitter, fan forums, theories exploded. Side-by-side comparisons emerged. Analysts pointed out body language, facial micro-expressions, even Meghan's smile, deemed different when Reuben was near. Some fans defended her, others turned. But the tide was shifting, because now, even diehard supporters were asking, What's going on with Meghan and her bodyguard? And Harry? He stayed silent. But his silence was deafening. The private confrontation. One night, back at the estate, Harry and Meghan crossed paths in the kitchen. No staff, no assistants, just them. She reached for a glass. He handed it to her. She whispered, "You really believe this, don't you?" Harry looked at her, eyes tired, jaw clenched. "I don't need to believe. I just need to see." She didn't respond, just stared, swallowed, left the room, and from that moment on, they stopped sleeping on the same floor. The reaction from inside the palace. The image didn't just reach Harry's team. It reached the firm, senior royals, advisors, damage control specialists, and the internal response. Panic. If the affair became official news, the monarchy would face global embarrassment, further division among the public, a surge of sympathy for Harry, and the risk of legal fallout if palace funds had ever been used in proximity to the affair. One insider revealed there were talks about cutting Meghan off entirely, financially, publicly, quietly, but no decision was made. Why? Because Harry hadn't spoken publicly. His silence was their shield, but they knew it wouldn't last. Because the photo was just the beginning. The video? That was next. The bigger picture. Because here's what the public doesn't know. That photo. It was taken 10 minutes after Meghan and Ruben exited a hotel lobby. Alone. A hotel where the guest log mysteriously disappeared 2 days later. A hotel where 2 other staff members confirmed seeing unusual activity between the Duchess and her security escort. The photo was not just an accident. It was a piece, a breadcrumb, and when Harry looked at it, he didn't just see a touch. He saw a roadmap leading to the next revelation, the one that would finally break him. And it was all on tape, because a hotel bellhop made a copy, and that copy found its way to Harry's inbox. But what it showed, you'll never forget, because it wasn't just intimate. It was criminally bold, and it plays out, frame by frame. Next, what if the ultimate betrayal didn't just happen once, but was planned, rehearsed, and repeated behind locked doors in 5-star suites? What if the lies weren't just emotional, but tactical? Prince Harry thought he had seen the worst. Texts, body language, late-night glances. But nothing prepared him for what surfaced next. Because when a single video file appeared in his inbox, sent anonymously, it didn't just confirm his fears. It detonated them. This was visual proof. Unmistakable. Undeniable. Unforgivable. And it all took place in a secret hotel room that shouldn't have existed on Meghan's schedule. But it did. And what was caught on tape would bring the royal marriage to the edge of collapse. The hotel, a fortress of discretion, tucked inside one of London's most exclusive neighborhoods, stands the Belgrave Grand, an ultra-luxurious, invite-only hotel reserved for diplomats, celebrities, and the ultra-elite. No signage, no lobby crowds, no online booking system. You only stay there if someone powerful wants you there. And Meghan? She had stayed there before. But this time, it wasn't on any public itinerary. No official charity event. No press briefings. No lunch meeting. She told staff she was attending a quiet women's wellness forum held in a nearby private club. Her team even provided mock schedules. Printed, stamped, bulletproof. But Meghan never went to the forum. Instead, she checked into room 903 at the Belgrave Grand. And who checked in under a separate alias 15 minutes later? Ruben Weston. The bellhop's confession. The video didn't come from hotel management. It came from a bellhop. Young, overworked, curious. He noticed something strange on the day of Meghan's visit. 2 security details arriving separately, not speaking. Room 903 being sealed off from cleaning staff. A do not disturb sign staying up for 14 hours. At first, he shrugged it off. Until he reviewed hallway footage as part of his routine shift. And that's when he saw it. Meghan, Ruben, entering the room. Not together, but staggered, 7 minutes apart. Still close. Still deliberate. Then, no movement. No exit. No food deliveries. No outside calls. Just silence. And 4 hours later, Ruben exits alone, buttoning his shirt, checking his phone. Meghan exits 20 minutes after that. Fresh lipstick. Hair newly brushed. Face neutral, but glowing. The USB delivery. The bellhop copied the hallway footage to a personal USB stick. Not for blackmail, but because he felt used. His words? I used to respect them, but this wasn't private. It was calculated. It felt like a show for everyone who wasn't looking close enough. He sent the footage to a royal contact. No name, no threats, just a note. You deserve to see this. For your own sanity. It made its way, quietly, to Harry's hands. And when he clicked play, he didn't move for 15 minutes. Because the file didn't just include hallway footage. It included elevator footage. From the private lift to the penthouse floor. And in that elevator, Harry watched frame by frame as Meghan pressed the floor button. Ruben leaned in. She didn't flinch. Their lips almost touched before the doors closed. There was no kiss caught, but the intent was crystal. And Harry? He felt it more than he saw it. The phone call that followed. Harry didn't call Meghan. He called Ruben. The number, still in his contacts. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click. No answer. Just a robotic voice. This number is no longer accepting calls. Cut off. Just like that. And Harry realized something chilling. They were planning this. Not just an affair. Not just sneaking around. But a strategy. Cutting ties. Controlling optics. Outrunning exposure. And Harry? He wasn't just the betrayed husband. He was the liability. The room service receipt. It gets worse. As Harry's legal team began investigating the stay, they obtained internal hotel documentation through a confidential intermediary. What did they find? Room 903 had 2 room service charges. 2 sets of meals were delivered to the hallway table. Champagne, chocolate fondue, and a sign note from the kitchen that read, "Enjoy your special night." The room was registered under a female alias. But the meals? Billed to a corporate card linked to Meghan's lifestyle brand assistant. Again, the paper trail wasn't obvious. But it was there. And now Harry had it. All of it. Why this moment broke him. Betrayal isn't always about physical intimacy. It's about intent, secrecy, control. And this was premeditated betrayal. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. The hidden room, the misdirection, the denial, even the elevator moment. They had to know there were cameras. And yet, they still did it. Why? Because they thought Harry wouldn't fight back. Because maybe Meghan believed she could manipulate the narrative again. But this time, Harry was building his own. The PR shield slips. Just days after the hotel stay, Meghan appeared on a podcast. Calm, poised, voice honey dipped with grace and self-righteousness. She said, "Trust is the currency we build our lives on. And when that's broken, we have a choice. Rebuild or walk away." The host nodded, unaware of the storm underneath her words. But Harry heard it. He knew what she was doing. Rewriting history, subtly painting herself as the victim, framing future headlines. And this time, he wouldn't allow it. Because he had one last card. Not a recording, not a receipt, a witness. And when that witness came forward, all hell would break loose. But that's next. Because while Harry was putting the pieces together, the bodyguard made a mistake. A huge one. He contacted someone he shouldn't have. And they kept the receipts. And what those receipts revealed wouldn't just threaten Meghan's image. They could bring her entire brand crashing down. We'll unravel that in the next phase. Because you've seen the videos. But what's coming is what Meghan never wanted anyone to hear. What if the truth didn't leak through a camera lens or a text message? What if someone actually saw it? Not a rumor, not a theory, not a speculation, but a witness. Someone who was there, someone who walked in, and someone who still can't forget what they saw. Because up until this point, Prince Harry had been piecing together a puzzle with fragments. Suspicious glances, deleted texts, hallway footage, a hotel room with a story that didn't add up. But this was the first time someone said, "I saw it happen," and their description would haunt Harry forever. The unexpected witness. Let's rewind 10 days after the hotel incident from Chapter 6. The setting? A secluded royal charity villa on the outskirts of Gloucestershire. Reserved for VIP recovery events. Rarely used, always protected. Meghan had volunteered to help coordinate logistics for a mental health awareness retreat. Or so she claimed. Harry was scheduled to appear, but pulled out last minute due to a confidential briefing. That left Meghan alone again. Or so it seemed. Staff on site said she kept to herself most of the time. Avoided group meals. Preferred room service. Said she was focusing on mindfulness. But someone else had been scheduled to visit that day. A mid-level assistant named Jasmine, working in logistics. Jasmine was responsible for dropping off paperwork. But what she walked into wasn't mindfulness. It was a moment of betrayal frozen in real time. Jasmine's testimony: she didn't speak for weeks. Not to the press, not to the palace, not even to her manager. But after the leaked hotel footage reached public forums, Jasmine made a choice. She filed a written statement. No cameras, no microphones, just typed words and her signature. And in that statement, she wrote, "I was delivering a packet to the West Suite. I had no idea it was occupied. The door was slightly open. I knocked gently, and that's when I saw them." She continued, "Meghan was in a robe. He was shirtless. They were standing by the window. Close. Too close. Her hands were on his chest. She stepped back, froze, didn't speak, didn't move. They didn't see me. Or maybe they didn't care. They were whispering, laughing, and then he kissed her neck, slowly, like it wasn't the first time." That was the moment Jasmine turned and left. Shaken, disoriented, silent. Why she stayed quiet? Jasmine was young, new, terrified of palace politics. She knew the stakes. One word, one misstep, and her career could be obliterated. So she did what most people do. She buried it. But the weight stayed with her. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was an accident. Until the hotel leak dropped. Until she saw the exact same behavior play out on screen. And then she knew. She wasn't crazy. She had seen what she saw. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. Harry confronts Jasmine. The statement eventually reached Harry's legal advisor. They arranged a quiet meeting. No press, no formalities. Just Jasmine, Harry, and the truth. When she entered the room, Harry reportedly stood for her, offered water, let her sit, and then asked, "I won't make you repeat it. I just need to know, is it true?" Jasmine didn't speak. She nodded. Tears filled her eyes. Harry nodded back. "Thank you. That's all I needed." He didn't ask for more, because he already knew. But hearing it changed everything. It made it real. Not a suspicion, not a maybe, not an if. It was a fact. The emotional toll. Harry didn't speak to anyone for 3 days after that meeting. No calls, no interviews, no appearances. One staffer said, he walked the grounds, didn't eat much, just kept saying, "I gave everything for this." Another overheard him say, "It was never about love. It was about control, about being wanted until I wasn't needed anymore." And what broke him most? Not the act itself, but the realization that so many people knew. Staff, security, even assistants. And no one said a word, because Meghan had built a wall around herself, a PR fortress. And Harry? He was on the outside of his own life. The public image crumbles. At this point, the whispers online had become roars. Fan accounts were dissecting every public appearance. Why is she never with Harry anymore? Why does the same bodyguard keep showing up? Why is Meghan smiling at him in every candid shot? Tabloids stayed quiet, still handcuffed by legal threats. But social media had no such leash. Theories exploded, thread after thread, timeline after timeline. And then someone leaked the villa staff roster from that weekend retreat. It showed Meghan Markle, present. Ruben Weston, present, listed under private alias. Jasmine Patel, assistant delivery, signed in, signed out. It all matched, and no one could deny it anymore. The intimate moment wasn't just physical. It was strategic. Let's be clear. The betrayal wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a neck touch or a shared robe. It was the cold coordination of two people who thought they'd gotten away with it. Because after that retreat, Meghan launched a new women's initiative campaign. And guess who was coincidentally assigned as her head of private security for the rollout tour? Ruben Weston. Despite palace advisors recommending reassignment, Meghan insisted, "He's the only one I trust." Those 6 words would later be repeated in a court affidavit. They weren't just a preference. They were a warning. A warning that trust had been weaponized and loyalty had been bought. The silent collapse of a marriage. From that point on, Meghan and Harry rarely appeared in public together. When they did, they didn't touch, didn't laugh, didn't look. Body language experts called it emotional distancing. Insiders called it the unraveling. But Harry didn't go public. Not yet, because he was waiting, not for vengeance, but for clarity. And when he got it, when the next witness came forward, there would be no going back. Because this time, it wouldn't be a staff member. It would be someone from Meghan's inner circle. A woman who knew the truth from the very beginning. A woman who had the receipts. And when she finally broke her silence, everything Meghan built would start to fall. But that's in Chapter 8. Because if you thought the assistant's statement was shocking, wait until you hear what Meghan's best friend knew and why she stayed silent until now.